be starting now. Good evening to the panelists and the audience. We're elated that you could make it to Girls.exe's first event. My name is Unnati Kumar, and I'm the overall coordinator of Girls.exe, an initiative to bridge the gender gap in technological fields by encouraging more women to participate in technology from a young age. Now, in today's world, women have definitely come a long way in the workplace in terms of the roles they're involved in. However, women still make up a very small percentage of the IT and technology center, comprising only a quarter or less than a quarter of conventional technological jobs or positions in corporates, startups, and universities. This then brings up the question, why don't enough women choose technology-related careers? Well, it could be the lack of female role models in tech, lack of exposure, lack of encouragement, gender stereotypes, skewed workplace cultures, among others. The lack of women in tech then ripples into embedded problems in technology like algorithmic biases, creating inherent inequality. Keeping that in mind, we came up with Girls.exe, aiming to enable young women to participate in technology and sprout their interest in the field. We plan to do this through webinars and discussions such as today's to provide more visibility to female role models in tech and dispel stereotypes, hackathons for women-centric solutions by women to increase their exposure, and workshops to help girls learn important tech skills. You too can become a part of Girls.exe's mission by becoming a member or participating in any of its events. Membership is free of cost and the form is available on our website at women.hacketsociety.in. With that, I'd like to hand over to Shiksha to introduce today's panel discussion and our esteemed panelists.
Thank you, Unnati. Good evening, all. My name is Shiksha Sabharwal. We are here today for a panel discussion on the topic, opportunities for women in tech. Therefore, I take this opportunity to welcome our speakers. The first panelist we have is Ms. Nipika Ramaswami. She studied at Bryn Mawr College and Harvard University. Currently, she's working as a data scientist at Leap Year Technologies in the US. The next panelist we have is Ms. Payal Lal. At the age of 22, she was the founder of 3 companies. She studied at NUS Overseas College and Yale NUS College. Currently, she's based in Singapore and she's working at LinkedIn to create equal opportunities for every member in the workforce. Finally, we have Ms. Kanye Puri as a third panelist. She's a bioinformatician. Having studied at Washington University in St. Louis, she's currently pursuing her master's from the University of British Columbia while working on the biological research. Now, I'd like to hand over to Namya. She's the moderator of today's event. Thank you.
Thank you, Shiksha. So I'm Namya Kathuria, and as Shiksha has mentioned, we have 3 wonderful women here with us today. I think we'll give them each a minute to introduce themselves first before we begin a real discussion, and they can just talk about what they do and why they're so interested in each of their individual fields. So Ms. Nipika, if you would be so kind to introduce yourself.
Sure. Hey, everyone. I'm Nipika. I am a mathematician at heart. I work on data science problems, specifically in the field of algorithmic privacy. So very much like on the bleeding edge of ethics in machine learning, data science, general use of data. And I studied math and data science in college and grad school, respectively. And yeah, generally, I think like framing the world mathematically is something that I've done since I was very young. And my education and what I do now is just a way to formalize that and sort of do something that I love most days of the year.
Thank you so much. Ms. Payal, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thanks, Namya. Hi, everyone. I'm Payal. I'm a former entrepreneur. So I used to do a lot of work in education tech as an entrepreneur. So my main area was working on increasing engagement in online learning by reducing dropout rates in moves through social learning tools. Right now, I work at LinkedIn, specifically with LinkedIn Learning and Talent Solutions, which is used by many individuals, but also by many companies to enhance employee engagement. So the areas I specifically work with are companies in APAC, which are small and medium sized, but trying to make their employees better at what they do and just grow with the company.
Thank you so much. And finally, Ms. Tanvi, would you like to go ahead?
Yeah, hi, I'm Tanvi. I'm a PhD student at the University of British Columbia in Vancouver. And what I'm interested in and what I work on is how we can target basically precision medicine to help, everybody, but I'm interested in women's health. And so I work on using large data sets to figure out how pregnancy and hormone exposure and things like that affect cognition, and cellular processing and things like that in middle age.
So it's really great to hear that we have three women with different fields in technology here with us today. But what does bind us all together is technology. So would one of you like to talk about how your interest in technology sprouted? From a young age, I presume that you were inclined towards the technological field. So once again, Ms. Nipika, would you like to go ahead and talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So I actually saw a big disconnect between tech, or like tech, what you think of tech or what I thought of tech, and science or math or something that's like pure, that has rules. And I saw this big divide for, I don't know what reason. And as a result, what I studied in college was like very much like theoretical mathematics. Not to say that there's not value in it, and it's definitely helped me, right? And that's what led me here. But I thought, hey, tech may not be for me. So I studied math, and then I went on to work in economic consulting. And what that experience taught me was, I mean, consulting, for anyone whose parents have done it or siblings have done it, it's just kind of a different ball game. Like there's very much of a business angle to it. And it was great to be involved in that. But what I realized was the tools that I used are quite antiquated, or at least were while I was working in consulting. And so that's what led me to discover sort of tools like, like Python, or let's say R, or Spark, to do like large data analysis, which is what everyone was doing in economics anyway, right? And so like that's what led me to sort of tech as I always saw it, which was like the use of tools to get something done. Now that something is open, like you could be solving problems in maternal health, you could be solving problems in learning, you could be solving, or you could be building like a big ad development tool or something, right? Like at Facebook, or even at LinkedIn, or like big tech companies. So it's really like, I see it as a tool now, having learned the tool. But there was a big hurdle for me to learn the tool, and it was just realizing what was being used was really inefficient.
That's really incredible. So Ms. Nipika, you work in data science, and Ms. Tanvi, you work in biotechnology. Was your experience as an introduction to tech similar, different?
It was actually really similar, because I did not mean to end up in tech. I'm a, biologist, neuroscientist, and like, it's exactly what Nipika said, is it's developing tools. And I think when your tools are cutting edge, then they're, technological, or they're advanced. And so a lot of my work just happened to be, it started off as, okay, I have this data set, I want to figure out what it's telling me. And I ended up having to write the code to be able to analyze it, because no human can go through like, 70,000 individuals with like, 40 variables each. It's crazy. And, so I think tech has sort of broadened in what it means. And also, I don't think anyone knows what it means. It's, so it was a complete accident. And I don't consider myself, if someone says, oh, what do you work in? I don't say I work in the tech industry, but there's undoubtedly the use of a whole lot of sort of technology and tools and, STEM areas that ends up working for me.
That's really interesting. Ms. Payal, would you care to tell us about if your experience was anything like this?
Yeah, similar. I mean, for the first 2 years, I didn't even realize I was in tech until, like some other people were like, oh, so how is it like to be a tech entrepreneur? And I was like, oh, okay, so anything with a website can be considered tech. So, I felt that growing up, I definitely didn't have an intention to be in tech. My parents were in tech, so that's the opposite of what I wanted. I think it was when I started reading up a lot of these, these magazines like Economist and Time. I don't know if you guys are into it, but I started reading these when I was in high school, so in like 10th and 11th grade. And there were all these problems in the world that I thought technology could solve. Specifically for me, what's close to my heart is education. And I don't think you need cutting edge technology to do that. A lot of it is pretty simple technology that you can use, as simple as a website or an app. That's actually, we've had technology for 20 years now. So I think, again, like I saw it as a tool to solve some really big problems. And, once you solve the big problems, the small ones follow. So I just thought it's a great tool.
Yeah, wow. So all three of you have mentioned that you weren't initially inclined towards tech as a whole, but I think all three of you have also pursued or are pursuing a master's degree. So what has really motivated you to pursue a master's degree in your respective fields or a further education? Ms. Payal, you can start us off if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm actually not doing a master's, so maybe I should pass this one to Nipika and Tanvi.
Ms. Tanvi, would you like to go ahead?
Sure. I started a PhD because so in undergrad, I wanted to go to med school because, whatever, 1/3 of freshmen come in and are pre-med. And somebody said, oh, you want to go to med school, you should intern in a lab. It's good for your CV. And so I did, and I ended up in a great lab. And somewhere around junior year, I was like, okay, I'm going to take the MCAT and whatever. And I was really cranky about it. And so my advisor was like, you don't seem excited. Are you okay? Like, is someone pressuring you to do this? And I was like, no. And he was like, do you want to go to med school? And I was like, no, I want to go to grad school, because I'd spent, how many ever summers of my life doing research. And I realized that I really enjoy it. I think, it's something very childish about being able to create data or, get data and create your own conclusions from it. And that's what I really enjoyed, was just the whole process of it, like the hands-on part of being able to get the data in my field of research, I really enjoyed. And then, being able to process it and analyze it and all of that. And that's honestly why I ended up in grad school, because I was like, oh, this is fun. And I'd do it if someone paid me not a lot of money, which they don't pay me a lot of money. So here I am.
Wow. Ms. Nipika, is your experience anything like that?
Actually, no. So I never wanted to go to grad school. I was like, I really hope it's not a necessary evil, but like, I don't want to tank money. And it's a huge opportunity cost. Like once you start working, it's, you're taking yourself out of the workforce for 1, 2, 3, 5, 7 years, like depending on what you're studying and what kind of degree it is, right? And like, I just really didn't want to do that, like so badly, because I thought it would slow me down. But the reason I ended up going to grad school was that I felt I needed a more like formal understanding of tools, and also because like data science, and specifically the field that I'm interested in, which is algorithmic privacy, is still very much an academic, or it's like born in academia, right? And there's a lot of tools that are in common with like, or rather, they stem from computer science, right? Like you need to know how to code. You need to know how to write good code to be able to write code that goes into a system that's running every single day at, LinkedIn or Facebook or anything, any website on the internet that uses machine learning or anything else, right? Like well-structured code, there's no alternative to that. So I went to grad school to learn how to do that. And what I came out with was an understanding of how basically everything is math, and that I should have really trusted my instincts. I don't regret going to grad school, and like it was a great experience. I would say like I got to work on a lot of different fields, so like computer vision, natural language processing, plus algorithmic privacy, plus trustworthy ML, which includes like interpretability and fairness in machine learning models. And so I got to work on all of these different fields through classes, seminars, projects, even internships, or just like thought experiments. And that was really great in helping me sort of build my toolkit. And now, when I go somewhere, I can talk intelligently about these things because A, I have the base knowledge. B, like I can easily look up what is the cutting edge in any of these fields. Like I have those tools, and that's what grad school gave me. Like you could very easily get those tools without grad school. If you know the resources to look for, grad school is just sort of like an easy way to do it. No, it's not easy by any means to complete it. It's just one way to get there.
It's really incredible how all three of you have such different experiences in your education with tech so far. So once again, all three of you, I think, mentioned that you weren't initially inclined towards tech. And I think that's a really common thing, that a lot of girls aren't pushed towards tech in their younger years in school or in college even. So I would presume you guys have faced a lot of difficulties going into the technological field. So what difficulties did you face? Was there a lack of opportunities? Was there a lack of role models in your life until now? How did you overcome this? I know it's a big obstacle for a lot of girls at our age even now. So is that something you can discuss with us? Ms. Tanvi, would you like to go ahead?
I'm trying to think of a good and or concise way to answer that question, which is, for me, I was actually fairly techie. I did the whole, STEM thing, and I obviously do it now, but I learned a lot. I did mostly physics actually in school, and I came into college interested in biology, but I had a physics minor, whatever. I think for me personally, and I know that a lot of women face, people either stopping them or not encouraging them. For me, it was the sort of, there was an expectation, right? There was no expectation. And I don't know if this is a thing in other Indian schools or cultures or whatever, but like our biology class was 85% female. But my physics and chem courses were probably, 70 to 80% male. And so there was a kind of skewed base, right? And so what that leads to is your top 5 people in your physics class, 4 of them are going to be men. And your, top 5 people in your biology class, 4 of them are going to be women. And you sort of imbibe that growing up, going through. And so if you did, in my experience, if you ended up doing well in, computer science or math, or not math, but computer science and physics especially, you were almost, you were one of maybe 2 females. And so, that kind of, I think it's some sort, it's subliminal messaging that people tend to absorb.
It's really interesting because my experience was completely different, because for background, for everyone, I went to a women's college. So Bryn Mawr is a women's liberal arts college right outside of Philadelphia.
Sorry, I should say I was talking about high school, but carry on.
Oh, sure. Yeah, well, I guess kind of similar, because I didn't take myself too seriously in high school. But anyway, I wasn't thinking about all these things that you guys are thinking about. But like, in college, I chose to go to a women's college because, well, a variety of reasons. I thought the community was great. I was very engaged in social issues. Very much about like, there are a lot of questions about, is a women's college even relevant now? Like, shouldn't we be completely integrated? And actually, I think there is a very good argument for going to a women's college. And that is that, like, I never had to think about being the only woman in the room because there were only women or like gender non-binary folks in the room. Like, I just never had to think about it for the first 2 years of college. And then in my 3rd year, I studied abroad at Oxford. And that's where, like, if you walk into the math building at Oxford, it is just like, it looks unassuming from the top. It's just all underground in these like really big lecture rooms. And you walk in and you're like, oh, geez, like, where are the women? I don't know, like everyone is just like taller than a certain height. And like I went in and I'm not very tall. But it'd be like, oh, I don't know. Whoa, this is weird. And that was really upsetting for me. So after having experienced for 2 years, like, I don't really need to care about my gender. I can just do my things and be really good at what I'm good at and learn about what I'm not so great at from people who like, don't judge me for my gender. Hey, they may have judged me for my ability or my questions or whatever. But anyway, I'd also add sidebar, like, I wouldn't care about that. And I did for a little bit, but just don't care about that ever. But when I was at Oxford, I realized, oh gosh, like I got to prove myself a little bit more than all these other people, because I feel like I stand out here. Like I don't fit in. This is not the average demographic of a math graduate, especially, one studying theoretical math at Oxford. So that was the first time I felt that. And ever since, I guess, like carrying that into my career and further on, I didn't actually work in math or tech for a while, right? Like I worked in economics, which is kind of 50-50, still more like the older folks are male, but a lot of women working in economics. And so I never really quite felt that. And then back in grad school, again, it was like, well, when you walk into a Harvard lecture theater, a lot of people are male. Like, that's just it. It's undergrads, it's grad students, it's PhD students, postdocs, like people off the street. Like I would say it definitely skews like at least 60-40. And that was an interesting experience, because at that point I was like, I really don't give a beep. That's fine. Like I'll ask the questions I gotta ask, I'll do the work I gotta do. And it's fine. Like I have enough of a network and a support system to work through this, but I'm not going to think about like the fact that I'm a woman. But also I would say like it led me to some very interesting projects, right? Because like my perspective on, I mean, basically like just sort of as a tangent again, like in a data science program, you're learning tools, but you have to find problems to apply them to. And so the problems that I thought were interesting may not have been problems that my male peers thought were interesting, but I convinced them to work with me on them. And like, that was great, because you get a lot of different perspectives and a lot of different experiences working on a problem that you really care about. And so like, there are pluses and minuses. I would say it's taken me a while to get here, but I just focus on the pluses now.
Yeah, that's really inspiring. I think there's definitely a difference in perspective being a girl in a technological field. Ms. Payal, can you talk about any obstacles you might have faced on your journey here?
Yeah, I think my perspective is slightly similar, but also different in a way, because I'm not actually a technical person in tech. I'm in the tech industry, but I'm not in a technical role, which I think does make a big difference. So in my experience, no one kind of holds a door shut against you if you're a woman. Like on the basis of gender, it's not like there are doors that are going to be tightly closed just because of your gender. But I do think there are two things that tend to happen that I've noticed. First is what Nipika was saying, you might be the only woman in the room. I think that can create a little bit of like self-inhibition where you're thinking that maybe I'm not meant to be here, maybe I'm not right. So that's self-doubt. That's something you address by yourself. But then there's this other component of, for example, number of women entrepreneurs. And I saw the graph, it was about 5%, wasn't it? 5% of entrepreneurs being women. So I think that can be a bit challenging, because if there are these little boys growing up with Mark Zuckerbergs of the world, for lack of a better example, or Bill Gates, they have these people to look up to who have made it there, not having done anything that those little boys couldn't do. But for girls, that doesn't yet exist to that large an extent. So perhaps the pull isn't there. But if someone says in this room, decides that they want to be an entrepreneur today, I don't think anyone's going to stop them from doing it.
Okay, that's really a different perspective. It's really interesting to hear. I think one thing we already have touched on is a question I had, that have you felt an inequality in the tech field? And I guess the answer to that from this is yes. But I think we so far mostly talked about education.
Sorry, just to add to that, I have a lot of thoughts on this. I think something that Payal said was really important, which is that not everybody who works in tech is technical, right? Like these are still businesses that need to run, or these are labs that need to run with a lot of domain expertise. It's not like everyone in the room has to be a computer scientist or a mathematician or like somebody who's a code monkey to be able to get the whole system to work. That's not it. In fact, like most tech CEOs have to work on not being technical. And a lot of tech CEOs are not technical, right? Like they have a vision and they find the people to build the tool, or they built the prototype of the tool and then they found the right people to actually build it out. And that's another important distinction, that like you can want to work on these things that are sort of life-changing, and the things that's like, right, it's the new finance, or it's the new thing that's gonna like run our century, or the next 20 years or whatever. And you can want to work on them without being a computer scientist. Like it's perfectly fine. And in fact, it's like so important, because I can tell you like the things that I need to work on the most, yes, it's code and stuff. And like, okay, maybe like I still have a lot to do. And yes, I do, I definitely do. But the things that I tend to need to work on a lot more are like communication, or like, oh, how do I tactfully get this person to do what I want them to do? And also pay me a lot of money, right? Like that kind of thing. And that takes skills that you don't necessarily like learn being a code monkey. So there's, I think, a lot of diversity in roles in tech as well. And I don't think it should be viewed as like a unidimensional, you got to code, or you got to have some sort of like technical things up there that are so advanced that, oh, only then can you get somewhere. There's, I mean, obviously a lot you can do without that, File being a prime example.
I think that's definitely something important that you've highlighted to keep in mind, that tech is not a monolith. It's a really big field and there are a lot of opportunities to explore. In the tech field, you know, all three of you are doing such different things, but they are interlinked to technology in some way. So I think you have mentioned an inequality in school and education. Can you talk about the inequality in the workplace at your job in terms of opportunities, maybe promotions, pay? Because we do see very few women holding top positions. Like again, Ms. Payal has mentioned, there are very few role models for women to look up to in today's world. So can you talk about these inequalities you might have experienced firsthand, or how you've overcome them, something you've done to combat these inequalities? Ms. Payal?
I think for me, actually, I wouldn't say I've faced inequalities. I just think there's not enough inspiring sort of tech women CEOs that create a pull. But honestly, I can't say I've faced discrimination or challenges, especially at my current job. They're huge on diversity, inclusion. So actually in my team, we're a team of 10 people and we have 2 boys in the team. So I think in my case, maybe because I'm non-technical, unlike Nipika and Tanvi, who probably have different experiences, for me, not a problem at all. Promotion and pay, very standardized. So I think it may be different because of the role, perhaps.
Yeah, that's probably true. I think your perspective is really inspiring to young girls who might be disheartened by thinking that technology is not a field built for them. I think your perspective is something really eye-opening. Ms. Tanvi, have you experienced anything similar or different?
I think, well, so academia is different than a profit-making company in terms of negotiating pay and promotions and things like that. That just doesn't happen. You take a qualifying exam and hopefully one day I'll get my PhD. But so there's a couple of things, and this is something that is not specific to women in tech. It's specific to women in general. Just statistically, women are less likely to ask for promotions. Women tend to negotiate against themselves before they get in the room. So it's like, oh, this is my dream salary, but this is what they're reasonably going to offer me. So just statistically, women will start bargaining lower because they've already talked themselves down. But this is not a tech specific situation. I think it's women across the board in any negotiating situation. Where I actually struggle, and again, I'm in a minority that I'm in a data heavy lab that's actually majority women. Like Plaza, it's a unique situation. My graduate program, my PhD program certainly was more male. Again, 60-40, but more male. But what I actually face issues with is my work itself. So because we're studying women's health, we have to fight an insane number of stupid questions. Like you go through school and people are like, there is no stupid questions. I'm about to tell you one stupid question. There's many. So I study pregnancy and hormones and things like that. And we submit funding proposals to the NIH and the, CIHR, which are large health funding agencies in Canada and the US. And I'm studying pregnancy, and I've put forth a proposal, and it's studying postpartum depression. And literally, I'm not kidding. There's a mandate to study both genders, both sexes, sorry. And there's not two sexes, there's more than that, but you can't just have single sex studies anymore. They encourage you not to. I submitted a funding proposal on postpartum depression, and I had a reviewer tell me that I should include males in my proposal. I study rats. There's not even trans people that I could include in the study. Seriously? And so nobody would ask to include a woman in a study about testicular cancer. This is crazy. And so, that's the kind of, and by the way, I say this because I think there's 60% of studies that are published that are male only. Nobody questions it, ever. It's oh yeah, this is standard. Males have less variation, so we're going with them. But the minute I submit a funding proposal to study women's health, it's where are the men? And I'm anyway, clearly I'm ticked off about it. But that's the kind of thing that I, in my workplace, that becomes a huge issue, is the work itself that I want to do, that people are, oh, why don't you include males in this? And I'm okay, if you can get them pregnant, go for it.
I think your argument is definitely very valid. I think that's something, you're definitely right to be in that mindset about it. Ms. Nipika, if you want to talk about any of these inequalities you've faced in your workplace or, in the tech field in general, and then maybe we can discuss, you can lead into talking about how you've overcome it.
Yeah, sure. I don't think I've ever faced anything explicitly. I think my understanding of sort of where I've landed and how I've landed here is there's a lot of self-talk that happens. And it's easy to get caught up in that, right? I noticed these things about the first time I ever got a job, and I tried to negotiate, and somebody was no, the pay is the pay. That's it. That's what you get. And, when you come in and you prove yourself, that's when bonuses come in, and that's when all these things happen. I call BS, but in retrospect, I did take that job, and then I discovered that there was a pay gap, and that was just based on, it wasn't a gender-based thing. It was based on what they needed when they were hiring, right, for the same position. 5 people quit, and then they were oh my God, we need to hire 2 more people to fill this. And then they paid more, right? So it was a demand-based thing, not to justify it, but just to say, then I had that in my back pocket as a data point to take with me to my next review. But there was nothing overtly gender-based there. I will say in grad school, I actually had the most success among all my peers, mostly male, negotiating salary and benefits and just terms of the job, because I went in with a very bullish attitude, and I was I have 3 years of work experience, and that is directly relevant to what I'm going to be doing, even if it wasn't coding in Python all the time or whatever. And I went in with this sort of overconfidence that I think is very encouraged in males, and that my fiance always encourages in me, which is hey, whatever, forget about what you think of yourself, forget about what you think people think of you. You have the data points, look at it objectively and think through, am I worth a certain amount that I think they're going to offer me? Am I worth more than that? Or, hey, from a purely financial view of this, what do I need to make up for grad school? I took myself out of the workforce. How much do I need to ask for? And how do I get that? And what's really easy to do when negotiating pay is to hold all your offers in your hand and be okay, this is good for these things. Benefits are great at place X, pay is great at place Y, coworkers are great at place Z. Let me take these 3 things together, depending on what I care about the most, right? Maybe I love the coworkers at place Z, but they're not willing to offer me as much. So I take all the data points that I have, which is, hey, these other people want to hire me too. So up your offer. Obviously, you don't say it like that. Like that's just myself, that's me talking to myself. But it's really good to have data points in hand and to be like, hey, you're asking me to move to San Francisco, California. You're asking me to move to New York City. You're asking me to move to, I don't know, Los Angeles. Like these are very expensive cities. You have to match the standard of living. Like you just have to do that. If I'm getting exactly the same offer in like the second tier, third tier city in the United States, like you got to match that and you got to exceed it. And so like having data is really important. I feel really passionately about this because like I think everybody should go into these negotiation conversations with overconfidence, but supplemented by data. Like you need to know what your market rate is, but don't be held down by your market rate, right? Like you don't know if the market is paying fairly. Like you don't know that. You have to think about, does this make sense? Does the market make sense? Do I have enough data points to take to my potential employer? And then can I use that to up something? Like I think this is very far off for everybody, but it's just a really good skill to have, to know to ask for your worth, right? And you have to put that worth in yourself. Nobody is going to tell you like, hey, I can't say, oh, only in 5 years, like this is going to be your worth. Like this is what somebody should pay you, because I don't have that perspective. I don't know like what you bring to the table. Only you know that. And you might have some proof, like everything that we do is sort of proof for what we can do in the future. And that's how you get hired. That's how you get into college. That's how you get into grad school. Like that's how you get appointed to board positions. That's how, you know, things work in life. Like everything is sort of like, this is my portfolio. Now trust that I can do the same thing or better for you in the future. And you have to take that understanding that everybody is not like, people might see what's on your resume, but you're so much more than that, right? Like people might see what's on your website, but you're so much more than that. And only you know that. Like even my fiance, who I've known for like 20 years now, he doesn't know that exactly. But times when I doubt myself, he's like, oh, okay, look at all these data points. Like, okay, now you're good. You feel good about yourself. Great. Now you go off and do your thing. And so like, I would just say, I think this is gone quite far, but it's going to be applicable to what you do at any point, right? Like applying to college or taking an entrance exam for college. Like you have to really trust in yourself. And some days are going to be bad. Like it's fine. Everybody has bad days. Like I didn't get here having 0 bad days, right? Like I've messed up. I've asked stupid questions. I've done some stupid things. I've definitely tanked job interviews, just saying, oh my God, I don't know that. And the best thing to do is to take that experience and learn from it, but also not define yourself by it. Okay, like that's what happened to me a lot, where I said, oh God, I'm having these bad experiences. Maybe it's me. And it's like, no, I'm not defined by the work that I do. I'm not defined by the, sample exercise that somebody gives me that I failed at, or I failed at by my own measure. Or maybe they didn't give me the job, so that's how I failed, or whatever. It's like you take that and you move on with it. And honestly, like the success is like peppered in there. You just have to work really hard to find it and also to learn from your failures. Like that's the most important thing, I would say. Like, yeah, gender-based discrimination might exist on a subliminal level, like in many places. Like a lot of places will say, oh, we pride diversity and we really want to work on inclusion. But hey, I work at a company where there are only like, I want to say 3 female engineers, and then 2 in product, that includes me, and then 2 on the sales side. Again, we're an 80% company. It's got like $50 million in funding. Like that's a skew, like you can see it. But what I do with that is I say, hey, the next time we're hiring somebody, or like I want to hire for my team, I'm going to be going to women's college graduates, or I'm going to be looking at groups that work on these problems that are very similar to what we're working on, but include more women, and like they're working on problems that might be adjacent. And so like that's how I take it forward, so that I don't propagate that and I don't just say, oh, it's happening. Like, I'm going to complain about it. But like you got to take that, and also like this group is a great example where you say, all right, we're seeing something is happening. We're not going to propagate that forward. Let's provide some good examples for everybody to sort of learn from, and make what they want from it. But just again, like having visibility and also taking that forward and providing visibility, I think is really, really important in also sort of avoiding that under the hood gender bias that occurs.
I think, yeah, that last part, especially that you mentioned about, managing your own self-worth, what you think you deserve as a woman in the tech field. I think that was really important. Because I do know that a lot of people face like, imposter syndrome, thinking if you really deserve to be here. So you talked a lot about that. That was really insightful. Ms. Tanvi, would you like to add on to that?
Sorry, I was going to say, I was going to add something to that. And so, you go online and there's all, I'm on Twitter and there's women posting and everybody's talking about imposter syndrome, and I agree with it. And what my best friend here is a guy, he's white, he is, 30 and is also a PhD student. And he was taking his qualifying exam last week, and it was on a Thursday, and on Wednesday he called me just like, this is the first time in my life I'm just sitting here and I'm wondering if I can even do this, and am I going to pass? Am I worthy? Should I be here? And honestly, all I heard from, and he's my best friend, he was in a lot of distress, but I'm thinking to myself, this is the first time in your life you've had this question. I felt bad, but I was like, you're 30 years old. You're in grad school. You're getting a PhD. You have 2 master's degree and you've never had this question. And I was like, I don't know any women who don't ask this on a bi-monthly basis. Like, is this right? Like, what is, and so, it's not a myth, this internal question. And especially when you're a minority in the workplace, I think you have to, like, my point is not that, women inherently do this more. I think it just takes more cognitive effort sometimes to turn it off, because like Nipika said, that you're in a minority workplace where you have to think about these things. And a lot of times men just don't have to think about. I couldn't believe it. I think I was a really bad friend in offering comfort, because I was like, well, yes, I understand this feeling. This happens a lot. You can deal with it, So it's very real that the discrepancy in how men and women, I think, feel that is very real.
I think that's really important of you to raise that to know we're not alone in that feeling is super important, I think, for a lot of people. Ms. Payal, did you have anything to add on to that in terms of, imposter syndrome or just feeling that way?
Yeah, I think great points by Tanvi and Nipika. I won't repeat those. I think very well explained. I will say from an entrepreneur perspective, when I was an entrepreneur, I think what I learned, and this could be for men and women both, but for me, I learned to always ask for what I want. So for example, if I need an investment, if I need money to run a company, or if I need customers, there is a tendency to think that what if that person who I ask says no? The thing is, if you don't ask, they're not going to be able to say yes, right? So I think learning to just ask for what you want and not being afraid of non-answers or no's is very important. And it's a little bit hard at first, because you might, again, that self-worth component might get in the way of you asking and thinking that you're deserving of that yes, but just ask, because you'll be surprised at how there are a few yeses that will come along the way.
I think there's been really constructive advice from all 3 of you. So that's really great to hear. Looking into the future, so you guys have been through a long experience of, education, work. There's more to come, but you've been through a lot. I think a lot of participants here are girls applying to college, getting started in tech, maybe facing inequality in the tech field. So how do you think young girls here right now can explore the technological field, especially because, we have the pandemic going on. So for a lot of places, I think India as well as here, it's really closed off. There isn't a lot of opportunities. So how do you think young girls can get into technology as an interest, especially since we're not often pushed towards it? I know I was encouraged, but still a lot of girls are not encouraged to go into tech. So is there something you would advise, recommend for young girls who want to go into tech? As an open question. Unless Ms. Payal, you would like to go ahead.
Yeah, I'm thinking about that question. I guess it depends on whether you're looking at making a career in a technical role, working for a startup or a big company, or you're looking at a more entrepreneurial route. If it's entrepreneurial route, you just go do it, go start your own thing. That's the fastest way to learn. I would say if it's more of going into tech as a way of working in tech, or say taking the Tanvi route and becoming an academic, then start to look at the skills that you might need. And, the pandemic is around, definitely is limiting, but then there are many ways to learn skills online, especially because it's tech. There's many ways to do it virtually and from far away. So I would say it depends on which route they're looking to go towards.
Yeah, that's really encouraging. Ms. Tanvi, would you like to add on to that? Since you have a different perspective, you've gone into academia.
Yeah, I guess for me, going into tech is something that's really difficult to conceptualize, just in terms of like, it's super broad. Like, you can be interested in, mechanical engineering is technical, and machine learning is technical, and neural nets are technical, and I think that all varies. But and again, this is not specific to tech, right? It's about being able to be in a space and feeling confident there, even if you're a minority, and not feeling discouraged to enter somewhere where you feel, or you feel that others feel, or others feel, that you may not belong. And so I think, like Payal said, it's about figuring out what you want, and then remembering not to. The worst thing someone can say is no. So what? I know that as someone younger, I did not apply for a lot of things because I was devastated by getting rejected for them. It was just really, it was like, I'm going to stick to what I know I will get, or what I know I'm really good at. And what that lands you in is a trap of you not being able to learn something more. Because if you're already really good at or overqualified for something that you're applying for, then by definition, you're overqualified. You're good at it. So don't be afraid to apply for things that you think you may not be qualified for. Again, it's a resume. What will they say? No? Who cares? You care, and I'm a fairly thin-skinned person, so I still feel bad about it. But it's important to apply for. Don't be held back by the possibility that someone is going to reject you. It is not personal.
That's really insightful. I think that's something good to remember. Ms. Nipika, would you like to add on to that?
Yeah, I can provide some very specific resources or advice for especially those interested in sort of data science and computer science, not knowing exactly what field you'd apply it to. I would say if you have some time, and if you have the inclination, if you have a problem that you think is interesting. So for example, maybe you're using Spotify. I think there's Spotify in India, but maybe you're using Spotify, you're using Apple Music, or using some sort of streaming service, and you're wondering, oh, how do they recommend songs to me? Great, Google the question. They use machine learning. That's how they do it. There's not somebody there sitting through, and they do it in a lot of very interesting ways. And so you could start with a question like that and see how far you get. Now, there'll be things that you don't understand. Hell, there are things that I don't understand about a lot of articles that are written. There's a lot out there on Medium. People have spent time looking up problems that you'd be surprised how many other people have had the same thoughts as you. But you can take the resources that you find online. So through, there's one way to do it is to look through Medium, or to look through videos where somebody is explaining what they've done. Another thing you could do is, if you have the inclination, you could literally just pick up a research paper from probably say the 1980s, because that's when a lot of ML and really AI type things started, right? I use I use a good number of algorithms that were created in the 60s. They're still super effective. And I would say pick up a research paper, even just to look at it and be these people are writing nonsense. This does not make sense to me. And eventually, right, as you progress in your understanding of, right, computer science or probability or statistics, which by the way, you need to know probability and statistics for data science. I'll just put it out there. probability and statistics is like the number one thing you need to understand, because everything in data science is probabilistic, right? It really, really is, unless, and also specifically in my field of algorithm privacy. But I would say like go through probability, statistics, and I don't mean like take a textbook, like work on a problem that you think is interesting. Like, for example, another one might be, hey, there's some data on, I don't know, if you're a runner or something, maybe there's data on running performance, and you look at that and it could be like a really interesting research question, and you might just be generally interested in it, and you'll be surprised at what you can find on the internet, like the type of analysis that other people have done. It's always interesting for me to read that, because now I can discern, oh, this is bad analysis, or like, oh, they missed these 5 things. But when you're getting started out, it's good to see how people approach problems, because I'll tell you a secret. In college or in grad school or even in the workplace, nobody's going to tell you like this is the right way to solve the problem. This is only one way to solve a problem, and you found the right way, you get like $500 or whatever. Like nobody's giving you that. There are many ways to approach a problem, and you can get that $500 by doing it any number of ways, right? Like there's a lot of creativity that goes into data science, machine learning, artificial intelligence. And I think that creativity is sometimes undervalued, or at least I'll say I undervalued it when I was younger. So just keep your focus on like trying to like solve an interesting problem, and then you'll find the tools to do it. Like the tools are data science, but you still need to find an interesting problem. Like, you know, you could work on learning, probability, statistics, computer science, machine learning, you know, whatever specific subfield that you need, and then go and work on a problem that somebody else finds interesting. But I'll tell you, I did that for a few years and it was not satisfying, right? Like it wasn't something that I cared about. It's just kind of like, okay, I'll do it for the paycheck and that's it. And it's not very satisfying. Like that's a way to do it. It's just my perspective is that it's not sustainable. So I'd say literally like Google it. A lot of people say that, but there are good resources in, of course, like Khan Academy to understand the basics. There's a YouTube channel called 3 Blue 1 Brown that explains linear algebra, which is again like immensely important for doing anything with numbers. And they also explain other things, like if you've ever wondered what is blockchain, like they explain that. They explain like Web3 protocols, or things like that. So there's a lot of like special interest things on that channel, and I love it. I honestly relearned a lot of linear algebra like 2 weeks ago from there. So I still use it. And finally, I'd say like really for me, when I felt really comfortable like going into any conversation centered on machine learning, and to this day when I go into interviews, I'm confident enough because I know that I can find research papers that describe exactly this method. I can read them and I can figure out what their sources are. Also, by the way, sources are everything. So if someone is quoting a number for you, like only 5% of tech entrepreneurs are women, understand where that number comes from, because you don't know what the sample is. You don't know who collected that data. You don't know if there was any bias in that, and you can judge that too. So always look for sources. And at the end of the day, like you don't have to complete every project. It's just everything that you learn, just know that it's incremental. Like it builds on what you've previously learned. If you take the time to really absorb it and reflect on it. I'll stop there.
No, I think that was definitely really insightful. I think it was really constructive in that I'm sure there are lots of young girls here who are looking to get into tech or are just starting out. And I think a lot of the information there was really helpful. I think I'll definitely be taking some of it into account. So we are going to run slightly over time, sorry about that. But I think just drawing the discussion in terms of my questions, our questions as a whole, to a close before the Q&A session. What's one piece of advice you would give to young girls starting in technology today? Just one piece of advice. If anyone has one, otherwise, Ms. Tanvi, would you like to?
my one piece of that's a really difficult question. I'm a concise person, as my students will tell you. It would be to you are your own person, and so you don't have to be in tech because somebody else wants you to. You don't have to not be in tech because somebody wants you to do something else. And okay, here's my one piece of advice. There is nothing new under the sun. That is my advice to you. Like what Lipika said, if there is something that you're experiencing, one, there is value in knowing that you're not alone. Two, the fact that you're not alone means probably somewhere there's some way to help you. You are never in a helpless situation. So ask for help. Yeah. Okay. Nothing new under the sun, and ask for help. There you go.
Okay. I think that's definitely something good to keep in mind. Ms. Pyle, do you have anything to add? Just a piece of advice.
Yeah, I'll just say, don't be your own enemy. There's no one stopping you for the most part. There may be a couple of people along the way, but don't stop yourself.
Definitely. And Ms. Lipika?
Yeah, I'd say spread your net wide. So like be interested in the things that you're interested in. And that may be computer science, but it may also be history, or maybe economics, and maybe like, I don't know, learning how to fix cars or something else. But just like spread your net really wide, because ultimately like having breadth is also as important as having depth. So don't close yourself off to things at an early age just because you think like you got to do it, or you got to just be like tunnel focused to be able to get somewhere. It's not always the case. And then also another like little reality about the world: everyone is just faking it until they make it, and making it doesn't really mean anything. Like that you define that. So you kind of like, honestly, sometimes I just talk about things and I like gloss over the details, and people will think, oh wow, she knows so much about this stuff, and I'm like, yeah, cool, what do you think that? But I don't. But really, like nothing is, don't take yourself too seriously, and it's not personal. Most things are not personal.
I think those three are very good pieces of advice. So to the audience here, thank you so much to the speakers for those pieces of advice. Hopefully that was a really constructive discussion for everyone. We do have a couple of questions from the audience, to discuss. So if you don't mind answering a couple of things that have come up from the audience here itself. So first of all, what's the scope of career in the technology field in the near future, looking at its growing need in today's world, while also considering that a lot of the population today is diverting towards it? So that's a pretty loaded question, but if anyone has any answers.
Yeah, I think honestly, it's what you define it to be, right? Because like you could, there is the standard tech space, which is big tech, right? And that's the companies you think of, like Facebook, Google, okay, maybe Zoom, right? We're using it right now. All the things that you use in your daily life. And then there are things that people are building at smaller companies that like you may not even know about because they only sell to businesses or they only sell to academic institutions. So first off, like the number of companies and what they're doing is like, it's far greater than what you think, okay? And I would say there is value in not being technical in tech, because tech without any guardrails or without any understanding of like how it fits into the larger picture leads us to things like Facebook and Google. That's what it leads to. I won't cite specific examples, but like it leads to a lack of understanding of how it fits to serve us, rather than for us serving it to meet some like ad agenda or whatever. But there's that. Then there's also, there are companies that you don't think are tech, but they are. There's like, and of course, this is a non-example, but like WeWork marketed itself as a tech company. It really wasn't. But I would highly recommend the WeWork documentary to anybody. Like that's a way that a company masks themselves as a tech company. So all of this is to say, like, it's probably like a lot larger of a universe than you think it is. And the ways to get involved or the roles that are applicable depend on what type of tech company it is, right? So like a lot of companies are community based. And so like a community manager or a community builder might be a really important role that's extremely like high up and high paid and has a lot of growth opportunities. But like my company, we build software, right? Like we build software that's based on math. And so knowing math is what gets you far. So like, it depends on what you're doing, what the business objective is. And also remember, everything is a business. Every single thing is a business. Even an academic institution is a business. Like you got to be making money at some point, although that's not always the case. We can talk about that more at some other point. Like venture capitalists don't want you to be profitable as a startup sometimes, depending on the space that you're in. But anyway, the point is at the end of the day, you got to make money. So like everyone is going to give you some like resources, be that money or time, to make them money at some point in the future, or you pay them when you go to college, right? So like, just remember that that's the underpinning of the world. Yes, you know, everyone can have thoughts and opinions on it, but at the moment, like it's my perspective that that's how it works. So understanding it is better than fighting it.
I think, yeah, it's really good. I think we'll entertain one more question, perhaps, since we've already run a little overboard. But I think another really important question asked by the audience is, how do you suggest we limit the gender gap or, you know, even out the playing field in the tech field in terms of, you know, even if we are given opportunities, there are still a very few number of women in tech compared to the number of men. I think you've all mentioned that as well as being present somewhere. So what advice, suggestions, anything, how do you think we can, you know, even out the gender ratio in technology in the world? Ms. Payal or Ms. Tanvi, if you have anything to say.
I can speak to how I see it being done. So, you know, LinkedIn works with a lot of companies to help these problems when it comes to talent management, because LinkedIn has this database of 700 million members in the world. So most companies which use it and which pay LinkedIn is actually not for learning or marketing or sales, but actually for hiring. So if you guys are on LinkedIn someday, you're going to have a recruiter reach out to you and tap on your shoulder to ask, you know, oh, do you need a job? Are companies looking? So through this data, I think what we see is that many companies will choose to close this gender gap, and many of them want to, because it's kind of like one of their KPIs right now. So what we see them doing often is looking at areas where there are women. So, you know, it is an education problem in that there aren't enough people like Tanvi and Nipika in the technical fields who are women. So that's a very obvious gender gap that we see in every market if it's a technical role. So then what companies start to do is they start to look at other departments that they need to fill roles for, and they pull in women in those departments so that at least overall as an organization, the gender ratio is balanced. Not that it solves the problem per se, because certain departments are still almost only men. But then that's where the education problem comes in, right? Like where there may not be enough women who are qualified to do that job. And I think that's a completely separate problem for the education world to solve.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just gonna, I mean, just data-wise, the evidence is that the leak starts somewhere between late elementary school and the end. By the end of middle school, the attrition of women has already, you know, significantly occurred in what they are interested in, which they're interested in because of, you know, several environmental factors and what they think they're allowed to be interested in, all of that. So systemically, it is early education. By the time you get to college, I think that technical side, you know, like Payal said, is once women are in, for example, graduate school or have high earning degrees, they actually tend to be hired at about the same rate as men. It's the proportion of women who end up in those education pathways a lot of the time that decides the eventual makeup. And then if you look at companies in India, the vast majority of them, HR is mostly female. like engineering companies will have, yes, we have like national average is 5%. We have 10% of women. Not one of them is an engineer. You know, they're all working in different departments. And so I think, you know, companies are trying to hire to fill that gap, and they do tend to hire from higher education and all of that. But overall, I think data shows that it's middle school education that has by far and away the most impact. So if you want to build a company to encourage women or girls in middle school to stay in tech fields, go do that.
Yeah, I think that's part of why we've started this initiative ourselves, you know, Girls.exe, why we're hosting this, because it's important for young girls to be pushed into technology, you know, to be encouraged if that's what they want to do, to be encouraged to pursue that. You know, that's why we're here today. So I think I'd just like to thank you all for such a constructive discussion and hand over to Unnati to say anything else.
Yeah, thank you, Namya. I think we'd all agree that that was an extremely enriching discussion and has helped us all make better sense of opportunities for women in tech. With that, we come to the end of today's event. I, on behalf of the entire Girls.exe team, would like to wholeheartedly thank our panelists for being here and gracing this event with their presence and perspectives. Thank you, Ms. Nipika, Ms. Payal, and Ms. Tanvi. I would also like to thank the audience for supporting this cause of promoting women in tech and attending today's event. We would strongly encourage you to join Girls.exe as well. We currently have a lot of things in the pipeline, like an upcoming hackathon and workshops, and we'd love for all of you to be a part of those events as well. In case you'd like to meet us personally and find out more about Girls.exe, we will also be present at Edbrand's College Fair on the 5th of June, 2021. Alongside College Fair, Edbrand also has an interesting upcoming offerings, its new AI ML program with IIT Kharagpur graduates, which you can find out more about at ai.edgebridge.